Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
I'm John Parsell.
Hi, John. Thank you for joining me. As I say every time, because I mean it, I say that every time too. There's so many things, right? I did the free association thing with you and I got a brain dump, which I think is a good thing. And of all the things that we touched on real quick, the idea so you have a co host named Rory, right?
Yep.
And I asked you before, what is it that made you and Rory start? And actually, it kind of surprised me because you have like a real specific, like you really saw a need.
hmm
So like, walk me through whichever of you first said, "Dude, we should start a podcast," and hopefully, the other guy like slapped them because it's a bad idea. But whoever said it first, what was that first conversation between you and Rory like when one of you went, podcast?
So Rory Sachs and I met through contact. Like we were networking online, and the individual that I had met first connected Rory and myself. We all started talking, and eventually that individual left, and it was just Rory and I talking to each other. And so we started to just talk about the challenge we were having in terms of wanting to talk to people who were having some of the same issues or challenges that we were having in the learning and development world. So our podcast is called Is Training the Answer? And what we found was that when you go to a website like a Reddit thread or a Discord chat, or you're on a forum somewhere and you're talking about learning and development, you're talking about instructional design, a lot of times the stuff, the content that's being talked about is really technical or specific. How do I use this tool? Where do I learn how to be an instructional designer? How do I do XYZ? Versus how do I have a conversation with a stakeholder who wants training, but I really don't think training is going to solve anything? Or how do I help the organization understand the value of learning and development? And so Rory and I started talking, and we're kind of going back and forth. And actually, podcasting was our last idea. So originally,
There's a lot of wisdom there.
yeah,
Don't do it.
so originally the idea was, wouldn't it be awesome if we streamed ourselves? So, they have today, you can watch people playing a video game. You can,
Right, you do it on Twitch. You can
like
do it on
Twitch. Yeah,
Facebook Live. There's a whole bunch.
exactly. So we started to discuss, okay, well, what would that look like? How would we do that? How would we get an audience? What would we talk about? Oh yeah, by the way, this is going to be live. So any mistakes or, crazy things that people brought up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. We'd kind of be on the hook for. So the more we talked about it and the more we explored the options, the more we kind of realized that what we wanted to do was to help people, to educate people. And if we could provide, like a nice, maybe 20-minute, 30-minute recording or interview with somebody, have a conversation, have a point of view, and really help somebody walk away with, okay, so what are the takeaways? What did we learn from having this conversation? That would be a really good thing. It would provide value to the L&D world, the community. And so that's really where the idea came from. And then it just, evolved over time. It was like, well, what technology do we use? How do we actually make this happen? So,
How do we? Who's first and who's second?
yes.
And who's third? Who's fourth?
Yeah.
What surprised you about? I was going to say, like in your day jobs,
Mhm.
has anybody? So you basically started this as I don't want to say a side gig, but it's not
Mhm.
what you do for a living is not make this podcast.
Yeah.
And have the two worlds like discovered each other yet? Has there been like the amoeba joining of people discovering that you guys are doing this? And
Yeah. So for me, it happened during an interview. I was interviewing, and somebody said, "Oh, I know you. I follow you," or like I've read your stuff. I actually think it's been beneficial, and I think one of the reasons that it's been a beneficial aspect or thing is because we're really trying to come at it from a place of value, right? We're trying to add to the community, and we're trying to help people.
hmm,
And so because of that, I think it's seen as like a really positive thing. We're very focused on talking to people and learning from them and trying to share what we learn with others. And that was one of the reasons why we decided in our initial season that we would talk to people outside of learning and development, because we really wanted to understand, why do people come running to L&D and say, hey, I need this training right now, or, build this, I need this e-learning, or I need XYZ. And sometimes when you have a discussion with them and you start to dig, start to peel back the layers, you start to kind of understand that, well, I think learning can help, but it may not solve the challenge that you're having right now. But they don't understand that, or they don't see it that way. And so really the question was why, and hence the name of the podcast is Training the Answer. That's kind of where all that came from. And we decided we wanted to explore this topic and see if it worked out.
How do you decide, or where do you go to get the ideas that you want to explore? Like, my guess is out of the gate, you guys probably have like a bushel basket full of like, oh, let's figure this out. Let's, but how many things are in the bushel basket, right? Before you're going to be like, okay, the basket's empty. Like, how do you figure out what thread to pull on next when you want to go figure something out?
I think that was a big fear when we first started, and one of the reasons why we just decided to limit ourselves. Like, we'll do a season, right? Because what if we found the answer? What if after 10 episodes,
training is never the answer, right?
Well, we were like, after 10 episodes, we just say, you know what? I think we've explored this topic enough. We found what we need. Like, we've done what we came to do. But what we actually found was, we're spending less time actually talking to each other and more time talking to people outside of L&D. So we thought it would be really hard to get guests. And that's actually been the opposite case. Like, yes, initially it was a little bit difficult to get started, but now we found that it's actually pretty simple to get people at least interested in the idea of doing the podcast. The challenge then is like scheduling and getting them actually. Yeah.
But welcome to humans, right? Like, life is complicated.
Yes. And so I think we're actually going to focus a little bit more on just talking to each other and exploring some more ideas, and really trying to explore this topic a little bit more, and things that are tangential to it. And I don't know if we would run out. And I think if we did run out, that would be okay, because then we would just be able to say, hey, listen, this is what we learned. This is what we came to do. Here's what we learned, and here's how we think it can be helpful to you. And we're going to go try to do something else. So I don't think that would be a bad thing if we just kind of ran out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm laughing. Oh, yes. To be able to finish any project. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. What do you think is, see, sometimes the problem with basically nearly live shows is when I have a great question and then I forget it. It's like I forgot it.
It's okay.
I was going to ask, what do you think? Okay, hit complete left turn signal. So far, what you're doing is one way. You guys it's a broadcast medium.
Yep.
What are you thinking you're going to do? Are you going to do? What are your thoughts on how are you going to engage with the people that you were trying to help? Just like your original.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have ideas. I think really right now we're focusing on kind of perfecting our cadence, perfecting or improving. I shouldn't say perfecting, but improving our messaging, improving our social media presence, improving the site is trainingtheanswer.com. And I think really just tweaking those things that are that create a solid base for our podcast. I think once we do get to the point where we feel like, okay, now we need to focus on comments and getting people's feedback and interacting, I think we could potentially try to get more comments on the site, or try to get comments on LinkedIn or wherever we're posting, and try to interact there, offer people to come in and be on an episode, offer people to ask questions, and we'll bring it up in another episode. So really trying to interact that way. And we'll see how that works. We'll probably have to do some research. I could probably throw that back to you and say, like, you started a community. How are you getting people to I'll learn from you. You tell me, and I'll implement that.
That's good. Well played, sir. Way to drive that one back over the net at me. Yeah. John and I know each other in other like social contexts from years ago. I was like, yeah,
We
okay,
do.
nicely played, sir. Yeah, like a lot of times guests are nervous, and John's
Mhm.
just like, it's just Craig. It's whatever.
Well, you're very good at what you do. Like I said, I did listen to, you know, I did a little bit of research and listened to some of the previous interviews, and I was actually very impressed with the way that you're able to come up with questions on the fly. And, you know, I knew that you were going to do that word association thing. And I probably spent way too much time. I went to the dentist. I actually got braces put on. I spent way too much time thinking about your question. Like, well, what does, like, when I think of podcasting, what comes to mind? And, you know, like really trying to
That's it.
figure it out.
For everybody else listening, I'm changing the question from this point forward.
I
I'm going to
think
make
you
up a
do.
random word generator. Free
Yes.
association, coffee. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying so.
Yeah.
I do tell people don't prep, don't show up early. I mean, it's like it's all good. No matter how much you prep, things go wrong anyway. Just in general, no matter how much one preps, things go wrong.
Yeah.
What's surprised you the most? A little like meta. Often I find you ask, how do you ask good questions?
Mhm.
First of all, if a thing pops into my head that's probably interesting, so I chase that when in
Yeah.
doubt. The other thing I do is I'm often looking for transitions or inflection points.
Mhm.
So for John's a smart guy, but for everybody else listening, sorry for everybody else. A transition can be like a big thing. Like I transitioned from job A to job B. That's like, okay, that's like a really obvious transition. But the
Mhm.
inflection points are interesting. When did you go from, just like rhetorically, not to John, but when did you go from thinking about becoming an apple grower to thinking about how you grow apple? Like, there's a subtle shift there. So a lot
Mhm.
of times I ask questions around, ooh, where's the transition, or where would it be? And then, okay, how do I find that inflection point or that place where their thinking changed before the transition? Because I'm always looking for ways to help people figure out
Mhm.
how to make change, or how to be the change you want to be, and that kind of stuff. um, so maybe what's something that surprised you guys, like you're sitting around, you're chewing the fat about the project, and should we go faster, should we go
Yeah.
slower, but you're really talking shop, and something that you've realized that, oh wow, we're really talking about this thing that we had no clue we would ever be in this part of the weeds about.
Yeah, I think one thing, and one thing in particular for both of us, and then another, which was just I felt embarrassing for myself, was I could not get my audio right. So I have this. I literally, this is I think the first recording I'm doing on this microphone. So I'm really praying that it works, because I literally could not get my
I can't
audio
hear you at
right.
all. I've been reading your
Yeah.
lips the whole time.
And I think I felt doubly embarrassed, because not only was it not good for the podcast, but I'm a learning professional. Like clear audio is a huge necessity
Yeah.
for training.
Physician, heal
Yeah,
thyself. Right. That's the mhm.
exactly. Could not get it to work, and so hopefully this has fixed the challenge. But I think actually one of the challenges that we had when we first started was, so we decided to do interviews, right? We wanted to do interviews and we wanted to talk to people. But what we noticed was that when we tested out, so we did a test interview with a friend just to test the concept. Like, will this actually work? Is this going to be worth
Yeah.
somebody's time? So we did that, and we actually did that with Raj. Do you remember
Yeah. I know
Raj?
Raj.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely know
Right.
Raj.
So Raj was cool enough to be our test guest, and it went really well. We both of us at the end of the session, Rory and I connected, and we were like, "That was amazing! I can't wait to do more. This is awesome." But what we found was we had gone in with this idea of having a conversation about, why did you think training was the answer? What was your experience working with L&D? How can we work better together? But what we found was that the conversation started to go in all these different directions, and we weren't achieving the goal of, we felt like trying to get specific questions answered.
Mm.
So what we started to do was, and we're very good at creating templates and creating materials. We're an L&D, right? So
And this is a case where we includes Craig and John. Yes, we are, John.
Mhm.
And template the shit out of that.
Exactly. So we created questions. Like we created before every session, we have a goal for the
Mm.
session, and we have questions. And in those questions, we have lead-ins. And so what we do is we share those questions with the guests prior to them joining,
Mm.
and they have time to edit those questions or tell us if they feel like something doesn't fit, or they don't feel comfortable answering. And so we share that with them. And then what we tell them during the interview is like, listen, we're going to go through the interview. very, very much like you were with me. Super nice, right? Super casual. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. Like all that stuff, right? It's not, it won't hurt. Um, and so then what we do is we go through those questions during the interview, and what that helps us do is it helps us from diving, I think, too deeply on a topic or getting way off topic because we heard something interesting and we just wanted to dive into it. And it helps us to kind of at least make sure that by the end of the time, we've answered the questions that we want to have answered. The challenge that we're
That's
having with that is that now we're feeling like
you,
it's not
dude. You
open
are on the
enough.
right
Yeah.
path. You are on
Mm-hmm.
the right path.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, and I think a lot of people who listen to this show are already podcasters. So the beauty of this is we're all we're all talking to the choir, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the and I've said this in many places. The fact that you're asking yourself the question and trying to figure out the answer, that's the correct answer. That is the answer, is to be mindful of the thing that you would like to get right. And there's a whole beautiful, it's like cooking. There are all these different ways you can mix together these spices and get different things out of it. And one of the things that I'm completely not doing in this particular show, not this episode, but this whole show, is I don't have any agenda. There are no
Mm-hmm.
questions. It's literally just, somebody called it kitchen table conversation. And that's like one end of the spectrum. But if you like come to the show with a particular, like not as a guest, but like as a listener, come to the show with a question, good luck. I mean, you can maybe
Mm-hmm.
scroll through the catalog and like find one that you think might scratch the itch. But generally I'm just like like I'll follow you wherever you go. I'll try and keep up,
Mm-hmm.
And in other projects in Mover's mindset, in the beginning, I was trying to be more like, well, I want to like have some takeaways here, or I want to feel like
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten something done after each episode.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I'm not saying that this is a noob thing and I'm laughing if people do this. I'm just saying in the beginning, I tried specifically recording little vignettes, and like,
Mm-hmm.
everybody coaches their guests. I would say to the guest, all right, I don't have them prepared, but we're going to question, answer, talk a little bit, and then we're just going to stop. And we're
Okay.
going to like lean back and like shoot the shit a little bit. And all that crap's gonna go on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized what I was doing is I was basically like, 50 episodes later, I was basically making little 20-minute podcasts, but we
Mm-hmm.
were doing 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 of them in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would throw 4 out. And then it's like, so like there's this beautiful idea of how much do we, the guest and I, want to
Mm-hmm.
attempt to create a particular thing.
Yep.
And I think in the case of your show, that makes perfect sense because you have a very clear vision. You have a
Mm-hmm.
mission for your show. So I think that's beautiful. That's when I ask you about like what surprised you, that you're off in the weeds thinking about now that you didn't expect. That's probably the greatest thing you could think of would be this. What the heck are we doing? What is our mission? How do we keep the ship going in the right direction? That's great. That's brilliant.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
I'll take
you're welcome.
that. I'll take that.
Stop, right?
Exactly. We can just end right now. I feel good. Thanks.
I feel like the disadvantage to recording digitally is I can't hand you props. I always wanted to give I want to hand the guest one of those, the staples. That was easy.
Yes.
That thing. I want to hand that to the guests so that when they're ready to just hit the button, that was
Just
easy,
done.
and
Cut
I'll
it
just
off.
stop the show.
Yes.
Oh, anyway.
I love it.
So you mentioned overthinking the hell out of it at the dentist.
Mhm.
Anything else that you had top of mind that you wanted to try and touch on in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned, and I think was really surprising to me, was that I kind of expected to hear more about challenges that people had with learning. And all our guests, for the most part, are really happy with their interactions with their learning and development team. And what I've really learned, I think the most, is that it's all about people. It's all about building relationships. It's all about sitting, thinking about when you're working with somebody and you're working on a project together. Don't get caught up in well, I need to do this, and and they're coming at it from they need to do that. It's collaboration, right? It's like sitting down. One of our first guests said, well, it's like me sitting down. I try to think of it as like I'm sitting down across from them and just having a beer with them. And we're just talking about how we can improve together and what we can do to fix things. And I really thought that was great, right? And so I just think that build relationships, get to know people, understand what their motivations are, their challenges are, so that when you do try to work together, you can kind of understand where they're coming from, right? And so it doesn't feel like you're trying to push your agenda and they're trying to push their agenda. I think there's a ton of opportunities to really do some great things if you kind of put that aside for a minute and just think about how can we work together, how can we fix this problem, and how can we do it in a way that produces like a really great outcome together.
Terrific. This is my
All right.
famous ending. I think that's a great place to stop. On one hand, I'm going, yeah, but I want to talk to my friend John more. We need to stop.
I know we need to connect.
We need to stop the podcast recording first. So I will
Yeah.
just say, John, thanks so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your persistence in getting me on and just saying like, hey, do you remember you said we wanted to do this?
Cool.
I appreciate it.